Hi, I'm Will Bruin, and I was just recognized as a Seattle Sounders legend. Now I get to do voice reads for the Sounder at Heart podcast network.
Here we go. Come on! Hey, O'Shan! Let's go!
The save by Fry! The Seattle Sounders have done it! MLS Cup winners!
Here comes Radius through the middle to crown it for Seattle! And now they truly can start the celebrations. It's the Sounders MLS Cup.
Nicoladero leaves absolutely no doubt! The Sounders rule the region!
Seattle Sounders, it's got good!
They've scored! They've scored! Finally!
This feels fucking awesome.
This is a tiny dog.
We want to win. This is the Seattle Sounders, bro.
Porteous says cheated.
You know, what was the thought process like, in terms of who you decided to use and who you didn't?
Ever since Sounder Hard wrote a commentary that we didn't take Open Cup seriously.
Welcome back to another episode of Nos Arietes. I am Jeremiah O'Shan, joined today by new friend of the show, longtime friend of the show, Matt Doyle, the Armchair Analyst. Welcome back, Matt.
New regular guest of the show, but longtime friend and supporter of the show.
There we go. There we go. I like that. I think you captured that well. So we're gonna try to do this regularly. This is the second time we've had you on, but we're gonna do our best to make this at least like a monthly feature where we sort of go through the Western Conference and come up with different ways to talk about it. This time, I thought here we are coming out of week 1, and I'm gonna call this. We're going to do it. Maybe this will be an ongoing bit, but today I wanted to play a little choose your own adventure with Matt. And so what we're going to do is we're going to run through the schedule of Western Conference games, and I'm going to give you two clearly overreacting storylines, and I'll let you choose which one you want to get into. And then we can kind of dig into it from there. How's that sound, Matt?
I'm always game for a bit. You know that.
Yeah, I figured you love bits, so this would be, I had to make it worth your time. And I will say, I hope everyone goes and reads your column today on MLSsoccer.com. It is always some really fun insight into some of the finer points. I liked the videos you're doing. How sad are we that you have to use Twitter, though, to like make these videos? Blue Sky needs to start making longer videos, like allow us to do better videos.
I was able to get them on Blue Sky, too. So I was able to learn how to use Handbrake, which is actually pretty simple software to compress video files. So they're all up on Blue Sky as well. The problem is our CMS doesn't take Blue Sky embeds, which is why they're still going out on Twitter. Which I would prefer not to use at this point in our decaying democratic world. But, it is what it is.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. I guess I'll now have to go back and find these things. I missed them on Blue Sky, but I did watch the videos, and I thought they were well done. So anyway,
they're fun to make, man. And they weren't as hard. It's not as hard to learn the software as I thought it would be, especially for, an old guy with a half-century-old brain that's probably mostly calcified. Like, all right, I was able to figure that out.
Okay. I like that. All right. Well, let's just start with, I want to say, I like that MLS is moving finally to this game of the week model where we are going to have a chance to, as a soccer nation, embrace a game every week and kind of treat it like it is, like the big deal that it should be. And this week we got Galaxy versus San Diego FC. And I guess the two narratives I'm going to let you decide to cook on is, did we underestimate how much the Galaxy will miss Ricky Puig, which I know was something you said they wouldn't do? Or has Mikey Veras decoded MLS after 1 week?
Let's take the Galaxy one and cook on that because I actually am currently overreacting on that. I handed in my power rankings, and I had the Galaxy I think 5th or 6th in the first power rankings because I thought they would be able to compensate without Ricky. I had him 16th in this week's power rankings because they just were not able to do anything in terms of ball progression, finding Marco Reus between the lines, and then they weren't really able to effectively stretch the field either. And like part of that was, Mikey Veras doing a really good job structurally setting that San Diego team up. But part of it was like, oh man, they really sucked at the things they were good at last year. And the biggest reason why was no Ricky Puig. And it just made me feel like, oh, they're going to kind of have to go back to the drawing board this week. They're going to have to do a lot of what they did in the last 15 minutes of the game when Elijah Winder came in for Lucas Sanabria. And he gave them, I think, more dynamism and sort of transitioning from possession to attack and getting them to be a little bit more vertical with, I think, more aggressive positioning and off-ball running. And like, I honestly feel that way after 90 minutes, which might be an overreaction.
Well, I think one of the stats that jumped out to me was Marco Reus only had, I guess, one key pass and 32 touches in 72 minutes. And you look at him as the player who you assume is going to kind of fill the Ricky Puig role. And that's like, I don't know, a quarter of his per 90 touches per, like that's a very different player. Like whether or not 32 touches is enough in a vacuum, if he's the guy that needs to be Ricky Puig is getting 120 touches per 90 minutes, basically. That seems like it's a problem.
I thought it was going to be split more between the two deeper lying defensive midfielders. And I think Greg Vanney did too, right? Vanney was yelling. This is as per Wiebe, who was on the sideline and could hear all of this happening. Vanney spent the whole first hour yelling at Sanabria, how you ever say the guy's name, that for being too high, for not being in a position where he could get touches and help combo play with Edwin Cerrillo. And I think the feeling is if Sanabria had been deeper like that, more of a 2-1 rather than the 1-2, that they would have been able to find Reus in between the lines more. So, it goes back to my overreaction, which was that Winder just did a much better job of that, both getting on the ball and then progressing the ball. And the reason why it probably could be an overreaction is like all that came in the tactics free zone over the final 20 minutes of the game when the Galaxy were like, oh, you know what, we're throwing the kitchen sink and we got to go for it. But it was worrying, man. It was a worrying, like super sterile performance from a team that on paper has the pieces to make up for not having Ricky Puig for most of the season.
Yeah, they had one big chance in the game, and that was with Miguel Berry on the end of it. That does not seem to be, even missing Joseph Paintsil, that was not, I don't think anyone really expected them to be so feckless, really in the attack.
And I mean, honestly, good job to San Diego. Because they were playing that super tight 4-3-3, and it almost reminded me of those great RSL teams from 15 years ago. They played a super tight diamond, and they were like, if you're going to beat us, you're going to have to take risks by playing out wide and overloads and get your fullback to the end line for pullbacks. But if you do that, you're going to open yourself up to be countered. And that's exactly how San Diego got the second goal to kill the game off. So saying, okay, bring them all up. We're going to go in the other direction because that's what you're taking a risk on. So it, like all of this, in how we're discussing the Galaxy, all of this is at least in equal measure well done to the newcomers for inflicting this level of suffering on the champs.
Yeah, and that is quite an impressive way to open. I honestly, I suspect there's going to be some growing pains for San Diego. There is always some growing pains, although I don't know, we sometimes overestimate how much growing pains expansion teams are going to have. I read some of what they said going into the season and it felt like, wow, that seems a little naive, but hey, at the very least, that last goal was one of the prettier goals. It was just a very pretty constructed, like the way it unfolded. Was just very satisfying visually.
Yeah, and Thomas Angel, who I don't think has ever looked like an MLS caliber player from what I've seen of him, like he hit a perfect pass right into Dreyer's stride for the goal. So like I don't think they could have asked for a better overall performance in their inaugural game. I think the only thing they maybe would have wanted was for Ingevartsen to look at all dangerous, which didn't happen. But yeah, 90 minutes in, 3 points, that type of performance, they're happy.
Yeah, and it can do nothing but go up from here, right?
I mean, for the Galaxy or for San Diego, because it could definitely go down. Yeah, I mean, it could definitely go down. Oh, you were being sarcastic. I got it.
I was being sarcastic. Yeah. It's the whole. Whatever can go wrong when an expansion team has too much success early on. All right. Well, let's move into the next game that these are in no particular order. I hope the listeners do not mind that I just sort of like randomly pulled games off the shelf to sort of like talk about. But the next one I wanted to get in partly because I'm interested in it. Obviously the Sounders are going to be playing RSL this weekend. A few things can change between now and then, but San Jose versus RSL, these are the two storylines I came up with. One, did we sleep on RSL's wooden spoon candidacy? And two, are San Jose like a playoff team?
Oh, both of those feel like overreactions.
Well, they are,
but I think the San Jose one is less of an overreaction than the RSL one. So we should talk about that. RSL is a potential wooden spoon team. And I'm gonna read you a quote from Bruce Arena. Okay. The scoreline wasn't fair. I don't think that's a 4-0 game. RSL had a lot going against them coming in with their game on Wednesday in Costa Rica and those challenges and all of that. So as a starting point, let's be fair about that. So it's tough to say that they're going to go from 59 points to wooden spoon, which is usually 28 points. Last year was 21.
It would be a big drop off.
It would be a really big drop off. And I don't think it's going to be that bad, especially because look, Pablo Mastroeni gets his teams to play hard, but they also look like a team that got rid of 3 of their 4 best attacking players last year, that lost something like 70% of their goals, that are changing their system a little bit and rotating their center backs a little bit in a way that I'm not sure makes a ton of sense. And when you add all that up, I still can't get myself to wooden spoon for RSL, but I could get myself to like sub 40 points. Like, oh, this team's 20 points worse than last year. And that'd be a little surprising, but not a lot surprising.
Yeah, I talked to one of our good friends, Matt Montgomery, who covers RSL for Wasatch Sentinel. And I asked him sort of what he thought going into this, and he was pretty blunt. He's like, we don't have an MLS caliber number 9 on the roster. I don't know if that feels too harsh for you, but it certainly seems to be kind of what's been what we've seen early on. You know, RSL's played now 2 competitive matches. They'd not scored any goals. Forster Ayago, is that how you say his name?
I don't know if it's a hard J or
right.
What,
okay. Well, anyway, this is a player who's started both of their games and doesn't really look the part at this point. I mean, he came out of MLS Next Pro last year at Nashville. He had 7 goals. You know, he was good in MLS Next Pro last year in relatively limited minutes. He hasn't done anything at the MLS level though, and even though he got some decent, he got about 400 minutes or so at the first team level. But yeah, I mean, this seems like a legitimate concern. I assume that they will patch this hole at some point, but they don't have a quick fix on the roster for the number 9 situation.
They don't. I think they really were expecting Elias Manuel to play this role, but he just didn't show up. They traded for him. Tom Bogert's done a lot of reporting on this. And there seems to have been a pretty massive miscommunication between the clubs and the players, but like he's not there and he's not going to be there. And I think he's the type of player that would have been it was a worthwhile chance to take on him had he been willing to play in Utah, but he wasn't. So it's kind of back to the drawing board. The name that I keep thinking is Duncan McGuire, because RSL's done a lot of good work in terms of transferring guys out and accruing some cash to spend. And now they should spend it on a center forward who could help this team. And McGuire's not a starter for Orlando City. And frankly, I don't think he's going to be. So can you get him for $5 million in a sell on? And if you can, you should.
Yeah. And my understanding is the Sounders and Orlando, at least, I don't know who ultimately walked away from it, but my understanding is last summer, the Sounders and Orlando were talking about swapping McGuire for Jackson Reagan. And so, which tells me at least that Orlando was open to that possibility of moving him on. And, granted, Jackson Reagan was, at the time, he was still out of contract, he was going to be out of contract, which is why I think the Sounders were exploring that possibility. But it was, that would be an interesting solution for them. But if people don't know about the Elias Manuel story, this is something that's maybe gone under the radar a little bit. When you said it, it sort of jogged my memory. But so basically what happened, if I'm correct, he was at Red Bull, he got traded. And then after the trade happened, he's like, no, I'm not about that.
Yeah. I'm not going to Utah. I'm like, okay. I don't think that's what, I mean, I haven't read all of Tom's reporting on it. There's just so much covering 30 teams, but like my understanding is like there was some level of miscommunication between both organizations and the agent and the player. And it's bad. It's really, really bad because he would help this team a lot.
Yeah. But they did. So it's funny because the 4-0 scoreline at least does seem pretty flattering, obviously, to San Jose. And RSL did create some chances.
Oh, yeah.
Now they were every bit as leaky as that 4-0. Like they were just gappy all over the place.
So they were gappy from the 65th minute onwards. And this is where I need to pull it back a little bit, right? Because they weren't good the first hour, but they didn't look like a team that was going to lose 4-0. But then I think back to Bruce Arena's point, they had a tough week. RSL did, playing in Central America and all the travel that comes with that. And, not being a fully formed team at this point. And I think the final 20, 25 minutes of the game, their legs just gave out, and San Jose, to their credit, were ruthless in a way that San Jose has historically not been. And so they took a what would have been a good win and turned it into sort of a landmark moment, hopefully for them in the turnaround of that club. RSL absolutely do need to learn from it, but I don't think what they should learn is throw everything away. It's permanently broken. It's like, okay, we have to figure out, if we're playing a team that plays with true wide wing backs, how do we have our legs in the second half to get pressure to them so Christian Espinoza isn't absolutely murdering us? And we're playing a team with a second forward that's actually starting deeper and making kind of Jordan Morrissey runs from the left to the right. Like, how do we get our center backs in a position where they can handle that and not have to deal with it in the open field as much, especially after an hour of running and 3,000 miles of flying over the past 4 days?
So one of the things I was a little surprised to see, I guess Pablo Ruiz was playing as a 10. That's a new role for him, is it not?
It's a newish role. They had him primarily as a deep line creator before the injury a year and a half ago. They don't really think he fits as a deep lying central midfielder in their new scheme. And for whatever reason, they do not want to use Diego Luna as a number 10, which I think is a problem. I think at this point, he's pretty clearly the best player on the team. Put him in the spot where he is the focal point of everything. And just for him as a developmental piece, he has to learn how to do that. He has to learn how to be the first name on the team sheet and the guy who is responsible for how things operate. And I understand why they pushed him out to the left last year. And like Kurt Schmidt has good reasoning behind it. He's like, he gets more touches when he plays as an inverted left winger than he does as a true number 10. And we want our young players to get like, that is solid reasoning. But like, we have moved beyond that point because of the personnel moves that the team has made. And the way you help this team is to get Diego Luna in spots where he could do what Albert Rusnak did on Saturday night, which was have a million touches on the ball and kind of conduct everything, whether that means he's in the box finishing or not.
Yeah, the other player who I took note of is Philip Quinton, who is a player who had been, I think, mostly been playing on the right, but they have him now. He's a big guy, but they moved him. I guess this is maybe a permanent move to move him to center back. What have you made of his play so far?
I haven't. I mean, you could knock me over with a feather that I just got asked on a podcast. The person I took note of was Philip Quinton. Can I phone a friend? Yeah, no,
I know.
I'm not going to talk about Philip Quinton.
Fair enough. He seemed like he was okay in this one. I just remember he struck me as a player who was way too large to be playing right back and had been playing right back.
I think primarily he's been a center back in his career. They used him as a right back because there were injury issues last year.
Fair enough. Well, I'll take a note that I actually managed to kind of stump you on something, but that's a new one for me. Real quick before we move off of San Jose, when I saw the plan that they were going to be playing with 3 center backs and they were going to move Espinoza to a wing back position, I thought that's an odd call, and it seems like it worked really well though in this first game.
It worked great. I was surprised that they did that because Bruce has always been a 4 at the back guy, except famously against Mexico and Germany 23 years ago. But it allows you to play both Chicho Arango and Joseph Martinez and not get completely gashed defensively. Because the 3-5-2 is a naturally sort of wide formation, and you have those 2 center back or central midfielders who aren't going anywhere, right? They're staying in front of the center backs, and then you have those 3 center backs who aren't going anywhere, and then you just hope that you get enough defensively from those 2 forwards and Munoz the 10 or Lopez Munoz, however he does it. You get enough from them to sort of shape the opposing build out a little bit, and you have 5 guys in position to sort of keep it in front of them. It's interesting to see kind of the 3-5-2 or the 3-4-2-1. It's becoming more and more the default formation in MLS because of that. Columbus, Cincinnati, Toronto used it, I think, pretty effectively last year. We've seen Miami try it at times as well.
The Sounders
obviously
the Sounders, a lot of it.
Yeah. So it's a club to have in the bag, I think, for most teams. It's a real kind of like old dog's new trick moment with Bruce, who's 72 years old, pulling that out in this game. But also Bruce will tell you that you're an idiot if you talk to him about formations at all. So
right. Yeah,
feels good. Feels good to have him back.
It's going to be fascinating to watch. The league's better, dude. I suppose, with Bruce in it. All right. 100%. So we're going to do Portland, Vancouver, which, I mean, I'll be honest, it was probably the most enjoyable match I watched of the weekend.
Because you're such a big Whitecaps fan?
Exactly. Because I am a Whitecaps stan. Exactly. So I guess the 2 talking points that we get to decide between here is Portland going to be doomed to another awful defensive year, or are the Whitecaps the funnest team in the league?
The overreaction is the Whitecaps take.
That makes sense.
Because the Portland take doesn't feel like an overreaction to me. Because this has been they've been in the league 14 years. How many times have they been in the top half of the league defensively? Like 3?
Have they?
Right.
I'd take the under on if we're setting over underlines. I think the under might be a solid bet on that one.
And they didn't make any big moves defensively this winter, unless it's signing in Ecuador a 29-year-old Ecuadorian D-mid who has Matt Doyle speed and showed it several times on the break. So I don't think that the Portland one is an overreaction. The Whitecaps one is, because so much of them being fun was based upon Jaden Nelson, who had himself an all-timer of a game and could end up being a valuable piece. But I don't think, I mean, he had 3 assists.
A goal and 3 assists.
Forget, like, the goal was nice. The 3 assists, like, he might not double that for the rest of the year. You know, like, he might end the year on 5 assists, because I don't think he has that kind of vision or instinctive ability to create chances. It was kind of a, you know, even on the one that he had to Vite, he kind of screwed that up, and Vite just took an unbelievably good first touch to put that onto his left foot. So it was. I was happy for the Caps, and I love that the new coach, whose name I have yet to learn, is willing to play the kids, because that team needs to play and develop the kids. But it's, to say they're going to be the most fun team in the league felt like a massive overreaction.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. But I guess let's talk a little bit about that game, though, because I heard some of the discourse following it understandably came around the Kamal Miller dog-so red card.
This is the Schadenfreude part of the podcast for your Sounders fans. Like, let's talk more about the Timbers losing 4-1 at home in their opener.
Yeah,
okay,
exactly.
Sure,
yeah.
Jeremiah. All right.
Right. I mean, I, as a neutral observer, I just am fascinated by the idea that that anyone could really, like, I get it. It's a soft foul, but if you are running behind a player who's in on goal and you tug on him, you're gonna get the foul. Now, in real time, I thought it should have been a penalty and then therefore no red card, but it looks like they actually nailed the call on it. And I don't know, you can call it a soft foul, but again, you're putting yourself and that was the second time that a Whitecaps runner was in behind, and that was like the 12th, 13th minute of the game.
Yeah, I don't think it was a soft foul at all. I think if that foul happens in midfield and you have 2 other defenders back, it's a yellow card every time.
Yeah, right, sure.
You know, and like, I don't think White dove. I think he tried to keep his feet, but like lost his footing after and then immediately got up and tried to keep playing. And then Kamal Miller committed another foul that would have been a penalty had the first one not been called. I can't imagine feeling at all aggrieved about a call like that.
Yeah, I agree with you. It just is I don't know. It is very funny because I think we've talked about it. Like the Phil Neville whole situation, the way I don't know, the whole situation around the Timbers just strikes me as so funny right now. I don't know. I realize that's
funny,
like,
haha.
Yeah, exactly. Funny to me, haha. But I don't know. I guess we don't have to. I probably need to be less petty because it's too early. But we got to get it out. But I don't know. I guess now may as well feel like as good a time as any to get into the Sounders Charlotte game. And I guess my overreactions would be: is Jordan Morris actually gonna be an MVP candidate? And I don't even know what do we say about Charlotte? What's a takeaway from this? Like, did they, like, I thought Dean Smith was refreshingly honest in his take after the game, where he basically said, I don't think we deserved a point. You know, we'll take it, obviously, but we were outplayed pretty much the entire game. And we were very lucky to sort of like get out of this with anything. But I don't know what, like, Charlotte looked like, Kalina looked like a goalkeeper of the year. Like he played very well, but they generated virtually nothing offensively. And the Sounders, you know, it's funny. The Sounders, the criticism I think most coming from the Sounders is sort of like a here we go again thing, because they did blow a lot of late leads at home. You know, this is a weird stat that I can't really make heads or tails of, but 5 times they led by 1 goal at home in the 85th minute or later. or 85th at the 85th minute. Actually, that's the stat. And in 4 of those games last year, they managed not to win the game. They only won one of them. And it was usually a situation where like they made their own mistake, but they weren't like dominating the game anyway up to that point. In this game, they were seeing the game out. I thought they were doing what you have to do to hold on to a lead, and they took a couple decent chances. They weren't super aggressive trying to build the lead, but the subs were pretty aggressive. They put on Jesus Ferreira, they put on Pedro de la Vega, they put on Paul Areola, they swapped Bell for Nuhu, but ultimately the play that breaks down is the kind of thing to me where if you can't expect your defender of the year center back to handle a header and a clearance like he had, that Jackson Reagan had, your whole there's no tactical approach you can take to limit those kinds of mistakes.
No, it was individual errors. I don't think this was anything systemic. I thought, like you, that 3-1 felt a lot more likely than 2-2 right up until it became 2-2.
Wasn't the case. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I think given the track record of Jackson Reagan and Yaimar, who has, I think, only like 5% of the fault on this goal. It was like 95% Reagan fluffing a clearance that he should have dealt with
twice.
Given the track record, I just don't think you worry about this. Say, okay, it's early season and shit happens, and we're coming from Central America, and there were probably some tired legs at that point, and come midweek we go again and we figure it out. I think.
What did you make though of Jordan Morris's performance?
Jordan Morris is an awesome center forward, right? Like, and he's not never going to be the most well-rounded guy. He's not going to go out there with his back to goal and be a Luis Suarez style playmaker, but like the way he set up 2 really good center backs with the run on that first goal, and then the second goal, like Morris has always been really good at finishing on the break. And obviously still has the speed to get there. It's been fun to watch him, take this opportunity. And if you had told me before the season, the line was 15.5, I probably would have taken the over.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that would be, that's probably about where he needs to be if this is to sort of work out in terms of his DP status. It'll be interesting to see how the Sounders juggle their lineup.
I want to push back on that a little bit. The thing about Morris is that even if he only scores 13, 14 goals, he justifies the DP status because of his gravity. Because he makes those hard, direct, unselfish runs at the heart of the back line that all of a sudden De La Vega, Rosnek, Rothrock, whoever is going to have and we saw it happen last year, right? The season turned on a dime when Morris became the center forward because suddenly all those creative attackers had more space to play in. And it's because he is relentless and unselfish with those off-ball runs. And every one of those is like a body blow to the opposing defense. And it's why, it's why he doesn't need to be a golden boot contender or a 16-goal scorer to justify that DP tag. I think he justifies it just by being out there because he makes the whole thing work so much better.
Yeah, no, I don't think that's unfair at all, and I'll take that. I'm now, as I'm looking at the conceit of this approach, I realize Charlotte's not a West Coast team. We don't actually have to talk about them at all.
No.
So there you go. That's a freebie for you. All right, so LAFC Minnesota. You wrote pretty extensively about this one. I thought you had some good observations. We'll get into those after we go through maybe the 2 potential talking points from this one. Is LAFC a possession team now? And because some good quotes in your story about that. Or I should say, did Minnesota actually fix their midfield this offseason?
I think both of those are overreactions. Let's take LAFC is more interesting to talk about. But let's go with Minnesota, because it's like I've never been a Will Trapp fan, and I thought he was really, really good in this game. And part of that was like they played a lowish block and they kept the game in front of them, and that allowed him to not have to chase. But he was really good, however you want to slice it. And I think the overreaction from Minnesota's point of view is, yeah, we fixed our midfield. We figured it all out. And it's like, no, this was just one game, and we have 12 years of data that says like Will Trapp's not actually that guy. Minnesota needs their new signings. They signed 2 new midfielders this winter. They need to get those guys into the lineup as quickly as possible, and they need to get them assimilated, and they need to get them playing big minutes, because as long as it's Will Trapp in that spot, they're not going to have the dynamism to turn those good moments into possession and penetration and chances and goals. And the flip side is, they can't really play any other way with Will Trapp out there, because he just doesn't have the physicality to chase plays and then make plays defensively. So I think it all ended up looking really good, and I think they have a valuable club in the bag, and I think he's a solid depth piece. But for Minnesota to get to the level that Seattle and LAFC and the Galaxy were at last year, they need the new signings to have hit. And given their track record on these signings under this new CSO, like, I think there's reason to be optimistic about it. But it's like we saw the difference between these two teams in the second half, and it was not insignificant.
How much of Minnesota giving up so much possession was by design, and how much of that is this is sort of who they are? Like, they're just not gonna have a ton of the ball.
I mean, Eric Ramsey was talking about it. He's like, we're not going to have a ton of the ball in this game, especially. But I think that is going to end up being their default, probably 70% of the time they play. I think they're going to have to come up against a team that's like, no, you have the ball, in order for them to climb above 50% possession. And like, it's understandable. Yeboah is so dynamic in the open field, and I think Tani is as well. And then obviously, Bongi on one wing and Rosales to a lesser extent on the other wing back. Like, they're better in the open field, so play in the open field. But it's, I have my doubts about how far that game model can take a team in the modern MLS.
Fair enough. All right. Well, we got 3 more games here, and I'm curious, which one of these do you find more interesting? St. Louis Rapids, Austin Sporting Kansas City, or Houston Dallas?
Houston Dallas.
Okay. Yeah. Houston Dallas. We'll start there, and then we'll really zip through the last ones. So will the Dynamo pick up where they left off, or will Peter Musa carry this team until they figure it out?
The overreaction is the Dallas one, right? Is more of an overreaction than the Houston one. Okay. Because Houston's problems are like strictly at this point personnel related. Like, they just lost too much from last year's team, and it showed on both goals. Dallas, I think there's a sense that, okay, we have the high price number 9 and we have the high price number 10 now, and we're going to be fine, because they're going to get chances like that, and they're going to put chances like that away. And it's like, no, they're not. You don't get gifts like that week after week after week in this league. Like, it could happen for, the first month, like it did for St. Louis 2 years ago, but it's not going to be an every week out kind of thing. So they have to figure out, I think, a little bit more how to be dangerous with the ball, and to get Lucho into spots where he can release not just Musa, but both wingers, right? Because Anderson Julio on one side and Bernie Kamungo on the other, they don't make the game. They are really dangerous off the ball, but they're not going to be combined. Like, they have to rely upon Lucho to make the game for them. So it was like a really fortuitous 2-1 win for Dallas, and they did a good job of holding on down the stretch when Houston were kind of throwing everything at them, trying to get an equalizer. But it was like it was fortuitous, and they need to play better and be more connected going forward if they're going to keep collecting 3 points.
All right. Well, two more games here. We'll won't spend too much time on these, but St. Louis Rapids or Austin Sporting Kansas City. Which one you like better there?
I think St. Louis Rapids.
All right. So we got City are actually good defensively, or the Rapids were a total fluke last year. Which one's more of an overreaction?
Both of those are overreactions. I think the Rapids are a total fluke last year is the bigger overreaction because they beat LAFC midweek in CONCACAF Champions League and they were the better team, right? That
and
was
they
not
didn't give up a goal in this one.
Correct. They didn't give up a goal in this one. Maybe Zach Steffen is back is the overreaction.
There you go. That's a good one.
He's been really good in 2 games, and I thought he was pretty good for the national team in January as well. And I've never been a Zach Steffen fan, but like he credit where it's due. He's been really solid in 2025. But no, it's an overreaction to read too much into how punchless Colorado were and say, yeah, 2024 was a fluke because they went on the road on short rest after emptying the tank midweek. And oh, by the way, they're playing without 3 starters, maybe a 4th starter as well. And then like 2 or 3 other rotation pieces on top of that. Like to go to a pretty decent team in St. Louis and get that scoreless draw, I think that says, they have something in terms of their mentality and in terms of their depth that they didn't have in 2024. Like they might actually be a better team than last season's. Though, if you gave me the points line at 49.5, because they were a 50-point team last year, I would probably take the under still, but just barely for this Rapid side.
Did you get much out of the Austin Sporting Kansas City game? I'm not even going to pretend there's a fair overreaction here. Like just did not strike me as much of a game.
There wasn't. It was tough. The Austin were missing their main guy, Uzuni, the guy they spent $12-13 million on. I thought that Owen Wolf was fun in central midfield, and Danny Pereira was fun playing more as a free 8. I'm worried a little bit that they still didn't create enough. Sporting Kansas City have probably been better defensively through 2 games than I expected them to be, but no goals. Dialing too much in on any of that is probably an overreaction. It's 1 week.
Well, yeah, of course. So early on, you put out your power rankings. Right now, who do you like who do you feel like is the class of the West right now? Who are the 2 or 3 teams that you feel pretty strongly are going to be punching in there at the end?
Definitely the Timbers. For sure, Real Salt Lake.
Okay.
No, if you're gonna the 2 obvious teams are still LAFC and Seattle.
Okay.
I had the Galaxy as the 3rd team in that group. Even after all the changes, I had them as the 3rd team in that group heading into the season. And like I said at the top of the show, I've already rethought that. So there is your big overreaction from the Western Conference week 1. The Galaxy are no longer the class of the West.
Well, in all seriousness, I don't know how caught off guard you were by this, but I was really the last, week or so of moves that the Galaxy were effectively forced to make, starting with buying out Sean Davis right after trading for him, having to trade $100,000 or $125,000 of allocation in 2026 to get $100,000 in allocation this year. So you're basically paying a 25% VIG to borrow allocation money just to get right. And then they worked this weird trade where they gave up allocation next year. I think another trade where they got, what was that? They traded an international roster spot next year for an international roster spot this year, while also giving up a 1st round draft pick. All of that, you take all those moves together, any one of those would be a kind of alarm belly type of move. Like, did something happen here? You take them all together, and their salary cap must just be like almost like, did someone make a mistake on the spreadsheet type stuff?
Well, I mean, they were famously inept in the front office up until Will Kuntz got there 2 years ago. And he's been trying to unwind all of that while at the same time putting together a team that can compete. And
did win MLS Cup.
Yeah, they won MLS Cup. And my guess is that a lot of guys had bonuses in their contract for winning MLS Cup. So suddenly the math that they had thought was pretty likely for 2025 changed pretty drastically. And I'm sure they brought forward $300,000 from next year's GAM into 2025 to pay for, like, obviously they did that or they wouldn't have paid that 25% VIG to get another $100,000. So like, it's like they're scrambling a little bit, but at the same time, they have, look, this is the team that they're going to be for the next couple of years. Like they're in pretty good shape with that. Royce will come off the books most likely after this year. Like he might not make it to the end of the year with the way he's looked so far. But it's like, it is part of the difficulty of maintaining a team in MLS, especially if you're not going to develop young talent. And that's the rub for the Galaxy. Where they are in terms of the talent around them, they should be selling a homegrown kid for $3.5 million every single year, even if it's just an Efra Alvarez type to Tijuana, right? Like you should be able to max out your incoming GAM every single year. And to that end, Ruben Ramos got on the field, which was nice to see. I think that I honestly think that Mikovic started over McCarthy in goal because Will Kuntz was like, look, we have to develop and sell this guy so that we can keep this roster together and get $3 million of GAM to do that for 2026 and beyond. Like I think that is part of the calculus.
I was wondering about that. I was like, oh, did something happen to McCarthy? I guess not.
Yeah. I mean, they had planned to start him last year, but McCarthy is just a much better communicator, and that they felt the team needed that with all the new pieces on the back line. And like, look, it worked out for them. But I mean, they're going to have to keep scrambling because their cap situation wasn't screwed up in 2 years. It was screwed up in 10. And it's going to take more than just 2 years to unwind all of the damage that Karofsky and Klein and the rest of that group did.
Well, Matt, thank you again for doing this. It was great having you on. I heard you on Soccer Wise this week. I thought it was great. You guys had your Golden Boot draft. I hope you're feeling good about your picks. Are you good? Are you also going to be doing Soccer Wise pretty regularly?
Yeah, I'm probably going to be on Soccer Wise every couple of weeks, and then writing 2 or 3 columns a week for MLSsoccer.com. Still putting out those tactics videos. Tactics Free Zone,
your Substack,
my Substack, which will eventually move to Ghost. I have to figure that out in the coming months.
Oh, but I'm here to help you with that one. Let me tell you.
Oh, excellent. But no, it's been fun to write. Like, it's brought me back to like my blog boy roots to be writing that Substack. So like, there's a lot of Matt Doyle happening just about everywhere. So.
Well, if people aren't already following you, and I don't know why they would be listening to this show and not following you, hopefully they have you on Blue Sky at Matt. It's Matt Doyle? What is your handle?
It's Matt Doyle. MattDoyle.bluesky.social, I think.
Yeah. Well, if you look for Matt Doyle, they'll find you on Blue Sky.
Yeah, that's it.
Well, great, perfect, Matt. It was great having you. Great talking Western Conference soccer. I'm looking forward to a full year of doing this on the regular. And we'll catch up with you maybe
we'll
next
talk
month.
Some Philip Quinton again in a month
exactly.
or so.
Do some real Philip Quinton discourse. All right. Well, I'm Jeremiah Oshan. This is Nos Arietes, part of the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network, and we will catch you next time.
we love you. Let's win another one!